Right. Good morning, good morning, morning. First, just a couple bits of housekeeping I've been told. So if you need toilets, just straight out there, down the end of the corridor. You all looked as if, sort of like, didn't know what that meant. So yeah, straight down the end there. In terms of questions, we're going to have questions at the end of this session, like space for Q&A. So just jot them down. As many questions as possible would be great. One other final thing, I need some enthusiasm here because I need one of those cliche selfies, don't I, really, with you all in the background. So, should we give that a go? There you go. Okay, Jimbo was in the way, but that's fine. Well done, mate. Dropped the ball first time. Okay, cool. Well, look, thank you very much for coming, everybody. Really appreciate it. Lovely to see you all. So we're the first session of the day, and we're going to be talking about RVS's move towards a world of fluid volunteering, which we'll explain all about what that is. But I'm sure most of us have all met by this point, but I know there's some folks come for the day as well. So I'm Ash, I'm the CEO and co-founder at Volunteero, and as I like to say, I'm the original frustrated volunteer that led to where we are now with Volunteero, and then I'll hand over to Dave.
Thanks, Ash. Morning, folks. Dave Stott, Director of Volunteering and Safeguarding at Royal Voluntary Service. Pleasure to see so many of you. Really good speaking to some of you last night. Looking forward to speaking to you more today. I think the main thing that's really jumped out so far, and it's been quite inspiring, is we all have different areas of impact, themes, causes, recipients, end goals, whatever. But the positives, the opportunities, and even the challenges, when it's boiled down, are pretty much the same. It's just how we get there is slightly different, and it's been really interesting sort of hearing some of your first-hand experiences, and I'm looking forward to not just this session, but the next couple of days unpicking that further and getting all behind common goals and objectives, really.
Great, thanks, Dave. I'm Sam Ward, and I'm Deputy CEO at Royal Voluntary Service, 30 years in this sector and 40 years as a volunteer. So I feel all the pain and then some of Ash's experience too. And it's just really great to be here, really grateful to Ash and the team. I think we can all agree they have looked after us exceptionally well since we arrived yesterday. And there's lots of really great energy in the conversations that I've had so far. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay. If any of you already know us, we're not super hard on the sales side of things, so we will not be subjecting you and cornering you with a big demo or anything like that. But look, for those of you who maybe don't know a huge amount about Volunteero, I just wanted to give you a bit of insight into who we are. So we are a volunteer management platform. I'd say we're kind of new kids on the block. We've been around for 6 years or so, but I think that's kind of our superpower in many respects, okay? We actually started from a world, as I kind of just alluded to earlier, where I was a volunteer and I just wanted things to be simpler, right? I've always volunteered for most of my adult life, and basically I always found the process was a little bit of a barrier to entry for me, and that's what I wanted to improve. But even from day one, we built it then in partnership with volunteer managers, because the simple fact is me and my co-founders were clueless, right? We didn't know what volunteer management entails, what you needed, so we had to hand over the reins to you guys, and that's exactly what we did. But there's platforms out there, and what makes us different? Well, I can't emphasize this enough. Mobile first, I think we know it's the future, right? It's not the future, it's already been and gone, essentially, but are we there? Are we catching up as a sector or not? Well, we want to help bring you forward into that new world of volunteering. And this is interesting. So a last snapshot of the data that we assessed. So we have a volunteer app, so iOS, Android, but also a web-based app. They're completely the same, but 87% of all users choose to use the mobile app now, okay? And that's when they're given the choice. It's not a survey, it's not hypothetical, that's real. So if you're not able to provide them that service or that entry point into volunteering, what kind of experience are you really providing them as a whole? And that's why we want to be the mobile first provider for volunteer management. Just to give you a bit of a snapshot of what that looks like now, we're new kids on the block, but we've seen 10 million messages already sent through the chat system. So we have instant messaging. Emails are, open rates are difficult. Everybody around this room probably gets far too many emails on a daily basis. And so this is how people are preferring to communicate nowadays, and that's something that we offer, among other things. We believe that tech is just a small part of what we do, and that's why our support is second to none. We've got a few clients in the room. If you want to ask them, hopefully they'll validate what I've just said there as well. And yeah, look, I mentioned that about emails, right? communication is like a foundational aspect of volunteer management. So if you're not getting your messages heard, if people are not getting those communications or reading them, then you're missing out on a huge amount of potential engagement. And so we have 98% of all messages on the platform are read versus an industry standard for email, which is about 30%, okay? And just finally from me, I mentioned kind of a little bit about that story, and that's really been important to us because we started just wanting to build a tool that I could use and make my life easier. We didn't start for any other purpose than that, and that's always been at the core of what we do. And that's very integral to our kind of culture going forward. But now we have over 300 clients already. You can see that, on average, we're seeing that maybe about 70 hours or so per month are being saved by any individual volunteer coordinator, just them through automation, bringing everything into one place. And then volunteers are more productive. If they've got an easy means of accessing what they do from a volunteering perspective, they go to check a message on the chat. They're one button push away from booking the next shift, signing up for an event. And that's really our kind of focus, is bring them all into one platform where they do everything. And it means you're going to see them do more as a result. And we're also finally a marketplace, and we connect in with the Govo platform. So our clients are also seeing a significant boost to their volunteer recruitment. So yeah, we've come a long way in that period of time, but now I want to talk about, and Sam and Dave will talk about fluid volunteering and what that's all about.
Thanks, Ash. So fluid volunteering, I think I coined it a few months ago. I'm getting that in there in case Ash starts running with it. I'm going to trademark it. I'm going to want some commission. Yeah. But just help set the scene a bit more before we really start to unpick what fluid volunteering is going to look like, and some of the potential, positives, but also challenges that we foresee as we start going through this. Royal Voluntary Service, like many of you here, a very long-standing charity, our 90th year is coming up in a couple of years. We are hopefully quite simple in how we operate, but our service portfolio is incredibly complex. We have retail, we have commission-based services, we have home library, we have home hospital, we have national services, remote-based. We have some like 65, 70 volunteer roles. And up until I joined RVS sort of 7, 8 years ago, that was our recruitment approach. We recruited into volunteer roles and opportunities within a service. So in an area, you would go into retail and you would be a trolley volunteer, and your role was defined. And it's worked really well. It had really great success. But as sort of Ash has alluded to there, especially in recent years, the growth of sort of tech, we all know, I'm not going to spout and churn data at you around the need for skills-based volunteering, transient movements, even just my employment journey before RVS. I was in London, I was in Manchester, I wouldn't have been able to volunteer as I moved through those places all over the years. So how can we enable that for more people? Obviously externally, we're trying to work on that through Govo with stakeholders, but obviously internally at RVS as well. And that sort of opened up an idea that, okay, we want our volunteers to be able to have more self-service over their volunteering with us. We can have in one geographical area 3 or 4 or 5 services, but they all have their own siloed management approaches, management structure. We have volunteers that may do, telephone befriending alongside their retail volunteering, but that is more the exception rather than the norm a few years back. But then, as we saw with the evolution of tech, digital transformation within RVS, we really started to lean into that a lot more. And Sam in a second will talk about the Volunteer Responder Programme and how that sort of shared some learnings. But alongside that, we've done a number of other things as well with external stakeholders. So we had a pilot project. I'm looking around the room and I don't think anyone's here from Red Cross or St John's. If so, apologies. We did a piece of work where we wanted to really try and proof of concept around the idea of volunteer passporting. So the 3 charities, we had 15, 20 members of staff across those 3 charities, from volunteer management, safeguarding, data, tech, compliance, training. So how can we create volunteering roles? So if at RVS you've done a DBS, you've done safeguarding, you've done data protection, could you then just go to St John's and do a similar role? And it was a long 12, 18, 24 months. But it was fascinating, just really trying to unpick that whole approach to volunteer management, and ultimately it boils down to permission and trust. You know, you need to trust and give those volunteers permissions to go, yes, you can do this. And also within those charities, you know, trying to change that culture and saying, our safeguarding, by and large, is no different to Red Cross's, to St John's. So if that volunteer comes across, we should trust that they know what they're doing. And we got to a point where we had 3, I use the word introductory, I don't like that term, but that's how we termed it, introductory volunteer roles where volunteers could move between, and we really defined that proof of concept, and it was pretty exciting and rewarding to be able to sort of play that back. Then things were superseded by pandemic and other things and volunteer responders. So whilst we look at that externally, that's just setting the picture a bit more about, okay, how has that led us thinking about internally? But I'll hand over to Sam to talk a bit about the VR programme.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So, yeah, we thought it was worth just mentioning why did we change and all the things that Dave's just said, I think we're all feeling or we felt for a few years now, and how the landscape's changing and people want volunteering to be more frictionless and easy for them to engage with if they're going to be able to do it at all. But for RVS's personal journey, it kind of, we were heading in that direction anyway. We were seeing some sort of tail off and decline in the volunteer numbers, and we knew we had to do something about it. And Dave's just mentioned one of the initiatives we had when we were trying to work through our own challenges around that. And then obviously the pandemic hit, and the government came to us and I think 2 other national charities and just said, is there anything you can do to prop up the NHS in this next, we don't know how long, and you've basically got 3 or 4 days to come up with a proposal. So we kind of locked ourselves in the room, came up with what became NHS and care volunteer responders. And, you know, the decision was, okay, we're going to go with RVS, just go and do your best work and kind of run at it. And we have a bit of an internal mantra. We say we run towards the problem in RVS. We're a bit crazy. We kind of do it and then worry about it en route. So we ended up with this big programme. And within the first few weeks, initially 750,000 people stepped forward. Over the course of responders, there was over 1 million people that carried out 2.7 million tasks supporting people in their homes. But what was happening to RVS at the same time was, like everybody else, we were in lockdown. We had an ageing profile of our volunteer army, support, family, however you want to describe them. And they were all told to shield. We had a big cohort that was 70 plus. And obviously that was a massive problem. We kind of fell off a cliff with our own volunteering numbers. So we weren't only just battling how were we going to get responders going, we were also battling how did we make our services remote or to garden gate for people that were desperate for all sorts of drop-off medicines, all sorts of things. But then on top of that, how did we also set up a call system? We'd never had a call service, a national call service to then support our own volunteers that were shielding or unwell alongside everybody else that we were helping. So, and I'm sure, you know, to some extent you were all feeling the same pain we were. And NHS at the time already had been through a procurement exercise with Good Sam as a tech partner, and they said you have to use them. And it was, and you know, it was an interesting experience. It was a challenge. Won't say any more than that. But they were cardiac response, and what they did was really good, but really niche. And all of a sudden, we needed them to do all these other things that they hadn't done before. So Dave, myself, other colleagues, we were basically at the point where we were writing all of the wireframes, handing them over, and then they were just coding to make it work. So we were really running to catch up with ourselves, and we learned an amazing amount of really good, valuable data as we went through that. And then as we came out, we thought, well, how do we hang on to this? The National Call Service was something that we carried forward. We'd set up a virtual village hall, which was basically everything you would expect to see in your village hall, but online. So we carried that forward as well, which were 2 new services. And then we were like, how do we take all this learning and all these people that have stepped forward? I think it was, what was it, over 12 million during the pandemic. A lot of those were people that were doing it for the first time for all the reasons I've explained. How do we retain and harness that really goodwill and that engagement in communities and be able to play that forward? So we had this idea, so I'm then coming into Govo. So we had the idea of Govo, and it was called something else initially, and it was coming from RVS's own challenges of not being able to find what we needed. So we were trying to think of how we would build something and what it would look like. And then, you know, complete fluke of a long-standing partnership already with Postcode Lottery. They came forward and said, we want to do a gift to the sector. Can you be a custodian of it for the sector? But it is for the sector, it's not for RVS. And Govo was born, so we came up with Govo. And I know from last night at dinner, quite a lot of your organisations are already on there, so that's fantastic to hear. And if you're not, we will plug, unlike Ash. So, you know, come and speak to me or Dave if you want to join Govo. Yes, and it's free to charities, and we want to keep it free. So, you know, that there's corporates that come in and etc. to make that happen. But as we were doing that, we were thinking, hang on, we've now uncovered another problem, because we've got all this learning, we're playing it forward into Govo. Govo is going to be amazing. But if we're completely honest with ourselves, our own internal volunteer management system is pants. And we don't want to end up in a position where somebody comes through Govo, because with my services delivery hat on, I am just a customer as RVS of Govo, one of the 1,800 charities or whatever we've got now on there. I'm just one of them. So if I get somebody comes through and finds my service through there, and it's all whizzy and fantastic, and then they hit RVS and go, ugh, this is now I'm in sludge, you know, now it's starting to slow down. That is not what we need. I need that really gold standard that just runs through everything. So that's when we ended up starting the procurement process. And at the time, we'd had a system called Cold Harbour. I don't know if anyone's ever used that. It wasn't really fit for purpose. It was more built for a domiciliary care setting, really. But back to Dave's point, nothing fit us. And no one we spoke to wanted to do the work to fit us and how we worked. So we had to go through the procurement process. And if anyone wants the details, come and speak to me and Dave. We're quite happy to go through the pain. But we went through five of the names I bet any of you could run off in the room. And obviously, we ended up with Ash and the team. And it was because, for us, Ash and his team, their approach was, we will work with you, we'll make this work. We want to learn as much from you as you can learn from us. We're going to do it together, it's a partnership. And they have been true to their word through everything. And to back up Ash's engagement with volunteers, I was having a conversation with someone last night that was saying that the pick-up initially with their system, not Volunteero, had been quite low because of the profile of their volunteers. It was quite an older profile. Well, our Calls with Care went first, and our Calls with Care is probably our oldest volunteer end age-wise, and it was over 80% pick-up within the minute we kind of switched it on. So I think it's all about being intuitive and being easy and simple, and Dave used fluid, I say frictionless, but it's that just make the path as smooth and easy as possible for volunteers to join us. So we're now in the very fortunate position where we're actually bucking the trend, and instead of our volunteer numbers going down, they're going up. So there is all that. And then I guess just to mention as well, in terms of the tech and just taking all that learning forward, this year, a few weeks ago, we became the platform of choice on Govo for the big help out. We're just getting the data through on the numbers at the moment, so I can't give you this year's yet. But the last time it was run, there were 4.5 million volunteering duties that were carried out over that period of time for the big help out weekend. So we're hoping it's going to be as good again, but they've used Govo for that because again, it is so easy and simple. But that volunteer journey and that golden thread of just sliding through into whatever you want to do, it's all about finding the opportunities that make people's hearts sing. I can't imagine there's anyone in this room that's not also a volunteer themselves. And you always get so much more back than you ever put into them, don't you? For sure. So that's where we've got to.
Thanks. I think before hand back to Ash, that was a very good plug of Volunteero, I must say. But so just sort of summarize, when 6, 7, 8 years ago when I joined RVS, very structured in our volunteer management. You would go into a retail service or a community base or transport, and apart from exceptional circumstances, you were there in perpetuity, the ability to look above and say, right, well, actually, there's a RVS service down there. Can I go and volunteer there? Or there's an RVS opportunity here for a couple of weeks. Can I slide over here and do that? That was something that we are seeing more of, due to volunteer requirements, but also volunteer expectations. They want to be able to be more fluid. And also with our new strategy, Volunteering for All, and I've spoke to a few about this, is we want, if someone goes to volunteer either on Govo or direct to RVS, yes, we hope we're attractive to them. If that RVS service doesn't have what they're looking for, then Volunteering for All means we should be enabling them to look elsewhere at RVS or outside across the sector. And if we're not playing that mantra back internally, then we are going against our own strategy. So it's been quite an interesting journey to get our internal structure set up for the way we are communicating externally about what we want to achieve. So it's been quite an interesting journey. So I'll hand over to Ash to talk for a bit more how we see the tech going to work. There are a huge number of considerations, challenges, pitfalls. I'm sure you're going to start furiously writing them down, and I'd really love to start unpicking them with you, because it'd be interesting to get your thoughts, and you might actually say something that we hadn't thought of, so it'd be really interested to hear your feedback as well.
Awesome, thanks Dave. So look, we've spent many thousands of hours now speaking to organisations just like all of you in the room, and I'd say fluid volunteering, they don't always call it that, Dave, but there's some sort of flexible, some sort of idea of flexible, non-siloed volunteering where volunteers can kind of more easily move between roles and do multiple roles, as comes up so frequently. But the reason it doesn't happen, quite frankly, is it brings on with it a hell of a lot of additional work, quite frankly, unless we believe you've got the right sort of tech solution and in play to make that happen. So what we're going to just walk through now is actually just some of the actual tangible details, right? How does it actually make that happen, okay? So Dave said, for example, and anecdotally, I'll actually bring it back to my own volunteering experience as well, right? So Dave said, you know, I can see an RVS role over here, I can see an RVS role over here. In a lot of organisations, that's not even the case. They don't necessarily know the other things that they can do within an organisation. So that's problem number one, right? If I knew about befriending, yes, I'm a retail volunteer, but I'd love to do that on the side as well, because that's flexible and I can do that sort of at times that suit me. So we needed to tackle that problem first, right? So what we do in Volunteero now is essentially you can create a world where everyone can see everything. Now that's probably scaring a few folks when you hear about it, and if you have sensitive types of volunteering roles, that's a bit nerve-wracking, but don't worry, we'll tackle how we kind of solve all of those challenges as well. But the first point of call is let people browse, right? Let people find out what's out there for the organisation they've signed up for, and we'll tackle the rest of it, the training, the safeguarding, the compliance. We'll let the system tackle that afterwards, okay? So this is just some example of when someone in RVS now will sign up, essentially, once they're through the very earliest stage of their onboarding, so that we know that they're not sort of, you know, chancers, shall we say, but they will then immediately be able to see everything on offer, local, national, remote, you name it. But then this is a very important step, okay? So every activity or opportunity that exists has restrictions, okay? So you can be confident putting these opportunities out there, knowing that someone can't turn up to the hospital if they're not DBS checked, they haven't done the relevant training. So what people can see is exactly what the requirements are for any given opportunity within the app. But that's not the end of it. This is a real key part, right? Well, how can I upskill myself proactively, right? There's often a world where, right, okay, I want to be in another role. I have to submit a whole nother application, right? I have to then go through training, some of which I've already done, okay? And then potentially I can find my way into that additional role, and then I'm managing them somewhat separately in different places through different processes. Well, with Volunteero, it's a single user profile, okay, whereby once they've upskilled themselves, they can actually access those opportunities. So in that example, I can see that I can be a calls with care volunteer, but I am missing an enhanced DBS and I'm missing some sort of training here. Within Volunteero, they can just simply click on those requirements and initiate them themselves, okay? And obviously we've got all the restrictions in place in the back end, you know, DBSs cost money, you can set approval limits and things like that. We've built all of this stuff into play, but they can go straight in. It could be signing documents, it could be providing uploads, it could be DBS or ID checks through native integrations, so it's again a completely automated and seamless process. But also it can be e-learning, which is hosted natively within the platform, where you can create all of your modules and restrict your relevant activities by those trainings and those modules. So imagine that experience from a volunteer's perspective. They've gone from that completely full world which is full of friction, stops them going between different roles, to a world hopefully where they can see everything that they can do, they can pick what they want to do, and they can make themselves compliant for those different activities as well. But I would just go one step further as well, because I would say probably 30 to 40% of volunteering we see is actually client or beneficiary facing. Now, when there's clients or beneficiaries involved, that's nerve-wracking, right? We don't want to put stuff out there and a whole, 10,000 volunteers can see this. So you also need to be able to restrict your activities to ensure that you're piecemealing information. You're giving them just what they need to know in order to decide whether they want to kind of pursue that activity or not. So within Volunteero, super flexible, easy to configure means of sort of saying, I want to share this information, but this I'm going to hold back until they're approved onto that given activity. Approval, you can set certain activities require approval as well as those key requirements like training, DBS, etc. as well. And even things like addresses, contact information, you'll notice a little call button in the top there. If it's mentoring or it's matching with befriending or phone, shopping drops or something like that, they've got the ability to call, but again, only once they can pass through that kind of initial gatekeeping within the system as well. And look, from a summary perspective, this is what we want to be able to do, right? We want to widen visibility so that all your volunteers can finally actually see what's there. Because I'll give you an example. When I first signed up for one of my local charities, I signed up, did the training, nothing after that, right? I was kind of left in the dark. I didn't know what I could do. And then it was me reaching out to find out, okay, I'm signed up now, what can I do? Well, that's not a world that we want to happen, right? We want them to know immediately once they're signed up and trained what they can get involved in. We need the system to do the heavy lifting for you, right? Okay, because compliance is super important for everybody in this room. Compliance is no longer a problem because once it's set up, you set it up, runs forever, okay? And then it's that proactivity. Most volunteers now, especially if we're talking about younger generation of volunteers, right? Everything they've ever had in their life has been instant. Food delivered in 5 minutes, right? Taxi just round the corner. Well, if we can't provide them with that experience, we're not going to capture them. We're not going to be able to engage them. So it's not just important for everyone nowadays, but even more important for those younger volunteers as well. And then for all of the powers that be, the execs, the trustees who are just naturally sort of somewhat scared of their own shadows at points, well, you can tell them that all of that is completely covered, okay? And just to wrap things up in terms of the hypothesis and hopefully if we can kind of execute on the RVS vision, what can be delivered?
Definitely, and I think just to add, this is not saying at RVS we want to move to a world where 100% of our volunteers do this. I was having an interesting conversation this morning where, and this is something I try and work internally and also externally, is that it's not mutually exclusive. People use different words, traditional, regular. I heard the word heartland volunteers this morning, which I quite like, and the new, more fluid, flexible volunteering. We need to create an ecosystem where they complement each other. So, the idea that all of our volunteers at RVS just go online, manage their own activity. For some, that'll be great, but some might just want to turn up at that retail cafe or do that transport at Wednesday evening, Saturday. We need to allow them to continue doing that and support them so that they're not excluded through this process. Because what I wouldn't want to see is someone who's been doing shifts for 50, 60 years, one particular day in time, they go on the app, all the shifts are taken, and they are now excluded because the shifts go live at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday when they're doing X, Y, and Z, or 9 o'clock on a Friday morning when they're in work and they've missed them. So how can we facilitate that in a way where your Heartland volunteers, regular volunteers can still continue, and then the additional capacity or requirements are then opened up to this sort of flexible, so you can still continue and maintain your service delivery. But within this model, that's where, especially in RVS, we see sort of micro, flexible volunteer and all of those more episodic things really coming to the fore. And obviously, different charities will facilitate that in different ways. So that's just one challenge that we've foresaw, and we're trying to work, okay, what does that look like? How does it work? Another thing, whilst compliance is going to be picked up, my head's already thinking, well, in 3 years' time, we do DBS renewals every 3 years at RVS. In 3 years' time, if a volunteer joins for a role that does DBS, but then through this model, they're doing lots of other roles that don't need a DBS, in 3 years' time, are we renewing that DBS? What activity are we monitoring so that when we trigger the renewal, it's at the right level? And actually haven't done those activities for however long, they no longer need a DBS. That then comes off their record. So if they go back to that original activity or task, they need to redo a DBS. So that's just another nuance we've sort of picked up and we're sort of working through. So that's that bit there. And then I think another area is how we facilitate the management. So if volunteers are being more transient within RVS, we are breaking that management structure. So if there's an issue, a challenge or positive outcomes at a particular service, it will be that volunteer manager or volunteer support mechanism that would channel through. If that volunteer has been around 5 or 6 different services as an issue, who holds the reins on that? And that's the RVS model, because we have quite a decentralised volunteer management. It's local service managers that do our volunteers. Our centralised team is fairly small, but we sort of upskill expertise elsewhere. So there's some challenges, and I like to see them as opportunities more than challenges, to really try and unpick that and ensure that internally we're geared up. So going back to Sam's, is externally we've got Govo. Question there, Jim, very eager, I'll come to you in a second. Externally you've got Govo, you can hopefully move between different causes, themes, and then within RVS we are trying to develop that ethos and mantra as well, where we can allow that facility to happen depending on whatever your motivations. So we're in early days. It's been quite interesting unpicking that for the last 6-12 months alongside Royal Voluntary out for our standard sort of service delivery and structure. And I know we'll probably continue this conversation obviously over the next 6, 12, 18 months, and I'm more than happy to play it back and identify the pitfalls with you. Some of you may think, no, actually, you know, it'd be good to have a chat about that and see what's going on. So anything else, Sam, before we open up for Jim's question?
Obviously, I speak to a lot of heads of volunteering from day to day, and there's a lot of departmental ring fencing and anxiety around the concept of somebody who's in retail and then bump off and do something else. And there's almost like an internal bias that we hold that volunteer. So how are you at RBS tackling the culture and the change management aspect? Not the software and the how, I obviously get, but the actual how you get people to be comfortable with the ability for somebody to go on an app and quickly jump to a fundraiser event and not have any sort of maybe fallout. What sort of
Yeah, so I think I touched on it at the start, and I think we're slightly different in RVS, and it always goes back to now our volunteering for all strategy is, if someone expresses an interest to be a retail volunteer, there's a reason why, whatever that motivation is. Because they might want to go and do fundraising or help the community doesn't mean they are a retail volunteer in perpetuity. They want to explore their journey and do elsewhere. So we should be facilitating that, because just because you've been trained on how to do a coffee machine or a trolley means you can't go and do some fundraising. So we need to build it up, and that's where, through that model, you know, with volunteer responders, we did the Get New Started guides to give them everything they needed to know. How can we package all of this up? So actually we're making it easier for volunteers to experience different tasks and shifts, activities, opportunities in a more bite-sized way that isn't, you need to come and sit here for 4 hours and do all this training, read all these booklets, and then you can go on the floor and do more things. So there's that internal culture piece, and I think it's, for me, it always goes back to permissions, just saying it's fine to do this. Yes, there are checks and balances we need in place, and the tech will do a lot of the heavy lifting, but a lot of people want to do it. A lot of our services are actually quite excited by this because they can see how it could potentially work, and they haven't thought, or they didn't think they could do this. Just go and speak to your service down the road and their volunteers if they want to come and join you, vice versa. So it's going to be, and yes, there are challenges. Yes, you're right, there is that protectiveness of some people and their volunteers, but with our strategy and our golden thread and that ways of work, and we are seeing that mindset shift, definitely.
I think as well, I think we forget, and it's such an easy thing, but when we're so busy and you just need to fill that rota, you forget these are individuals, they can do what the heck they like. You know, they're not that services volunteer or that charities volunteer, or they can only do that role, they can do whatever they want. and I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves that when we get so busy in the day job, and we've spent ages, even before GoVo, we spent a lot of time trying to change the challenge, the culture and the approach towards volunteering at a service level, and sort of embed that. So every time somebody was coming up with no, but Jane comes here on a Tuesday, to their opposite number that was in home from hospital or something, and it was challenged every time. And now it's much more about, you know, we want you to stay part as the RVS family, but you know, you can. I would guess if we asked a lot of our volunteers, probably 60% do more than one volunteering role, and they won't be all for the same charity. It'll be, you know, it might be Cats Protection League, and it might be Macmillan, and it might be RVS, or any mix of who's in the room. So I think we have to keep reminding ourselves that. But we've also said, you know, through your life course, I know myself, 40 years of volunteering, I think I've volunteered for 12 or 15 charities, totally different to each other. I've done mental health, I've done PTA staff, I've done youth homelessness, food banks, Through the course of my life, my interests or the causes that really speak to me at that moment in time change, and people will change as they go through. So we've said to our teams, you must understand, as long as we offer them every opportunity anywhere as they move around until exhausted, if they go on, that's great. But even if they continue to volunteer for someone else and it's not us, that's still a win. It's a win for our communities, isn't it? So I think we have to keep reminding ourselves that they can do what they like. Also,
if I could, just from a data and tech perspective, me and Dave have been talking, and obviously we want to keep drip feeding how things are going to the wider sector, right? Sort of build in public per se, and I hope that we have interesting data at the end that you could use to tackle some of those challenges internally yourselves, which basically show it's not a zero-sum game. It's not like you're going to lose your piece of the pie internally is going to get smaller. No, the pie gets bigger and everybody wins. That's what we hope to prove out from a hypothesis perspective as well.
Back here. Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what my question is. I need to put my hand up because I love it. And what my question is around kind of this. I'm going to call it old school principle of volunteer management, where you've got volunteer managers who know their caseloads, and that's something that we drill into them. We're like, you know, you've got a caseload of X number of people, you should be knowing where they are, what they're doing, how they're engaging with you should be difficult, you know, and that's kind of what I think probably many of our organisations have. So how is this impacting on, by putting more control in the hands of the volunteer to be able to, which I completely endorse, to say kind of almost like pick and choose kind of the roles that suit your skill sets that are interested in. What's then the impact on having, because I think it's still also important that volunteers have a named point of contact that they can go to and engage with. So, how does that work?
Yeah. So it's still early days now, and that I think goes back to, you know, we are going to have to develop our own internal management structure to enable this more. But to your point there is that the vision I have is, you know, there's all the volunteer tech that comes with that, and the hours saved, the capacity increased. That, you know, they're not doing the expenses all the time, they're not sending emails out, they're not messaging comms because it's all happening, a bit more self-service. So that capacity for me means that managers should then be, or we would like them to be more engaged with their volunteers. So rather than being in the back office doing expenses, are you just having a chat with Dave, with Ash, with Sam, saying, how's it going? What are you up to? Do you have more capacity? Do you want to do something differently? So what we see is, and we've trialled this in a couple of services where they come to say, we need 10 volunteers. All right, okay, so before we get to that point, let's have a chat and go, well, what do you need them for? Have you spoke to existing volunteers? Do they want to do more? Do they want to do less? Do they want to look at another service? Have you spoke to another service? Do any of their volunteers want to do it? And actually, that 10 volunteers, it might be, oh, actually, we need, if you want to grow and scale, we might need more. We might need 2 volunteers because you've done this piece of work and actually the capacity's there. You just haven't given yourself the headspace or you haven't got the resource to do it. So that's where I see, and this is not going to replace resource, it's going to allow the resource to be actually more personal to the volunteers. And I think that's, again, the shift that we're trying to get the mindset is let the tech do the heavy lifting. You can go back to being volunteer people managers, doing, really engaging with these and understanding what they're looking for, and then you can help them. So if they've come in and they want to do X, Y, and Z, you've helped them do X and Y, and they want Z, you can say, well, actually, RVS service down the road has got Z. Go down there and do that, and vice versa. It'll work the other way. So I don't have the answer, but that's how I see it beginning to happen.
I think it's also that cultural thing, isn't it? Because I know that we've got a lot of volunteer managers that are very protective over their caseloads. And they're like, oh no, like if that volunteer's based in London, they're like, well, they can't go to Bristol to do something. What if I need them here? And you're like, well, how about we share?
Yeah, no, definitely agree.
I really like the idea of tech stepping in to move to being more relational. That's a nice concept. Quick question from me is two things actually. One is about, have you rolled this out and is it prescriptive? And then also the second thing is that sort of cultural thing. What has been the buy-in from your local teams? Are they adopting it? Are they embracing it? How are you bringing them along for this cultural change? Because in our setting, it would be a big piece of work. So I'm just trying to understand how you've supported and where you're at with that.
Yeah, I think Dave said before, we're not particularly complicated, but we are complex.
Yeah.
And so we've almost got different approaches and cultures within different areas and departments. So to give two really stark differences, the volunteers in retail are, let us have at it, let's just roll it out everywhere tomorrow. We just want it, we're having it, and that's that. And then in the community they're going, let's be a bit more considered and just think about this, that and the other, and they're taking the time more. Some of the quite discrete services that kind of only do one thing, so like the call service, we just put that in first because it was quite tidy. But then you get into things like home from hospital, when people have got individual care plans and there's transport and there's this and there's that and there's all these other things that we have to think about. Then those are taking a little bit longer to work through. But yeah, it depends on what the role is and where it is, how quickly. And I don't think, we did some really good stuff, some engagement before it was even coming. And I don't know whether you've experienced it, but we've been going through huge tech transformation. It was like all of our systems were too old all at once kind of thing. And I think we all get there in the cycle. And so we've had a lot of upgrade EPOS in retail, and then it was the finance systems coming off the blocks, and we were doing a VMS, and we did a new HR, and everything was happening. And so our teams, lucky for us, our teams were then going, finance are getting that, when are we getting something? And you're investing over there, when are we getting something? So we could go, da-da, we're having a new VMS system, so you need to be really excited because that's what you're getting. And we did some sort of town halls, online stuff with the teams, didn't we? And we got them really excited, and Ash and colleagues came on and showed the demos and said, this is what you're getting. So they were all like, when are we getting it? So now we've kind of built a bit of excitement and momentum around it. But I think that was really important. If we'd have just gone in cold and said, oh, by the way, next week we're going to start doing this, that we'd have got all the resistance and the why nots. So, my advice if you're going through that is lay the groundwork, sort of a run up to it. It makes it easier.
Yeah, I think just to add is, it is early days. As I said, we are doing it more sort of discreet, siloed, and one of the things why I was happy to come here is, I like being in these forums. I thought, I'm going to take this to colleagues, peers across the sector and go, are we crazy for doing this? Or is there anything we're missing? Or is this got legs? And the feedback I'm getting is, okay, this has got some potential. So we are going to continue down the road. And once we get to some of the more challenging services and the complex ones, I think that's where it's going to become quite sticky to work through. But with knowledge, and that's why we're phasing it across to really make sure that, we're not going to make a service collapse by doing this. We want to make sure it's measured. Because, you're right, if I just turn around next week and said, right, hundreds of services, your volunteers can just do what they want. I mean, that would be carnage. So that's what we're just trying to do in that sort of approach, really. Yeah.
Actually, I just want to, sorry, my voice went then. I want to come back on Gemma's point and how that works and the protectiveness of line managers and volunteer line managers particularly. You know, if you've got a good volunteer, you don't want to share them with anybody. But we do it at the RSVB. We don't use Volunteero, but we have, and we don't call it fluid or flexible. We need to think of a term. Our local nightclub was called Fluid, so it sounds really, it's got connotations for me that have got nothing to do with volunteering when I was growing up.
You've ruined that for me now.
Sorry. Sticky floors and a weird smell. But there was, so it does happen in the RSPB, and we are complicated or not complex. I can't remember which way around you said it. We are quite complicated, and there are very different types of volunteering you can do. And we just allow the people to do what they want, and everybody has a contact. And if it's for ringing, bird ringing, very specialist, skilled, I couldn't be a contact for that because I have no idea what you need to do. But if it's then, so you have a contact for that, and then your other contact is for fundraising, for example, or community talks, because it might be that you want to do both those things. They're very different skills you're offering us as an organisation, and it's not one volunteer line manager. So we have some volunteers who do 7 different things for us and have 7 different contacts. That's their choice though. They choose to do 7 things, and their work is fed through to them by 7 different people because the specialisms are too varied for it to be one person. You know, even just doing a survey on reserve, off reserve is very different because we own land, don't own land, risk assessments are different. So we compartmentalise it and allow our volunteers to choose that. And we've got 5,000 more roles than we have people. So lots of our volunteers do lots more than one thing for us. And I think that works. Being able to see what you've just shown there, Ash, and the technology, making that as frictionless as possible would be wonderful. But actually it does happen if you allow people to make the choice, I think. And then the organisation is just what happens. People vote with their feet and move on. The other thing we've got that works really well is we've got volunteer coordinators. So it's groups of, we've got about 40 of them on our reserves. Our reserve offer is hugely different. If you go to somebody, I was talking to somebody about Minsmere last night, I can't remember who it was. It's got nearly 300 volunteers on one site, but you can do all sorts of things in Minsmere. So there's 3 different volunteer coordinators who find out what people are interested in, talk to the team, they sit on the leadership team for the site, and then they help with that movement of people actually, because somebody's coming in and they say actually I can do some of the ecology stuff, but I'm actually quite good with a chainsaw, so can I go and do some of that? So you can do that as well. So I think there's ways of doing it that are about allowing people to make, I think it's just what you just said, it's about making your choices that work for you and trying to break down that culture of you have to have one person that you speak to, and if a volunteer doesn't want to speak to 7 people, they won't do 7 roles. You know, and I think it's exactly like we do. How many things do you subscribe to? How many emails do you sign up to? And you vote with your feet.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to pick your brains on that. And you're right, it's not saying that doesn't happen. Definitely, you know, we have volunteers do multiple roles. It's how can we make it easier? And yes, some people might be having 7 contacts, but how can we streamline it so they can do those 7 roles, but it's channeling through one. But then we have instances where we have, you know, our central support teams get a message going, oh, I've just removed this volunteer from our records, and then they've complained because they actually do 2 other roles they didn't think about, and now I've deleted the record. And there's all those things that sort of come out, and it's how can we make sure that that's there. So we've got, was about 5 minutes left, or can we carry on?
It's a super hard stop.
Oh yeah, cool, that's fine. Yeah, back on.
Following on from several points really, and you say you're just at the beginning stages of rollout. I'm on day 3 of rolling out, and I'm here. So it is rolling out without me, which is a huge amount of trust in the team. So if I dash off or take some tech people with me, who know asking what's going on. I affectionately refer to them as my multiple hat wearers. We have lots of volunteers who do multiple roles, and I'd really like to follow up with you about that volunteer coordinator role, because that's something I'd really like to explore. But one of the drivers behind us choosing Volunteero, and this isn't a plug necessarily, but and hopefully it will play out in our reality, is that central visibility. So we know that any one volunteer might be managed by multiple different teams who deploy them in a different way. And being able to do that and have centralised notes that are with the right, protections around them, that if there are concerns, that volunteer manager can see who else manages that relationship. And so if there are concerns, you might see things that are a small concern individually somewhere, but collectively they become something else. And for me, that was one of the drivers behind having something where we could do that in a way that wasn't. I mean, we were using our CRM before, and it was woeful. I need to be fair to it. If it was a person, you'd be saying, well, you're using it for a job. It was never, recruited for. But that single view of a supporter, for want of a better way of describing it, is really crucial for us to be able to say, and I say similar to you, Sam, which is, they're not our volunteers. We are their chosen activity at that time because it resonates with them. And if we don't make that easy, frictionless, fluid, whatever you want to call it, although I don't think I can get past fluid being a microphone.
Sorry. I think I've ruined it.
Ruined it, absolutely ruined it. But, whatever it is, whatever you want to term it as, if we're not part of the movement that allows that to happen, we potentially remove ourselves from that ecosystem entirely. So, but yeah, it's there's multiple hat wearers. We've got far more people who do more things, and previously it was just like, this is my volunteer who does this on a Tuesday, and you're like, well, yeah, what do they do the rest of the week? And they might be with somebody else. So yeah.
Chris. So persuade the time for impact. I'm kind of really excited by the sort of, I kind of see the sort of democratisation of roles really, that widening it out to lots of volunteers. But I still think as a profession we tend to look at it through a kind of HR lens, from a process lens, and we bolt technology onto what we really do. And for me this hints at an opportunity to widen our thinking out to thinking that, I'm like a broken record about talking about volunteering as a community building exercise as opposed to an HR exercise. And if you look at it through that lens, then to take James' point, there's an opportunity to not just offer lots of new opportunities to existing volunteers, but actually widen that out to your fundraisers, to your campaigners, to your members, if you have a heritage place, to your visitors even, I don't know. There's an opportunity to look at the community, the wider footprint of people who support your cause and say, well, actually, especially getting into micro, here are ways to dip in and out and different volunteering. And I think there's an opportunity just to widen our horizons here. And I suppose the next iteration in my mind from that would be, I'm looking at James, because this is maybe your future one, is, well, how do we start to democratise ideas such that we find a way of enabling our supporters to come up with, collaborate and come up with ways to support the organisation without us having to generate all the ideas. And I know that's all kinds of scary things about control and, oh my God, what are they going to do? But actually, even if it's something as simple as we're holding an event in Woking, who else wants to come along and help out on that day? I just think there's something about, with your messaging potential as well, about having that conversation within the app. So I'm just interested in how we start to use tech as a sort of technology to sort of change the culture and the way we structure and think about what volunteer looks like.
No, I get exactly what you're saying, Chris. We've discussed this before. I don't use democratise because it's like the most ultimate startup buzzword these days, you see, so I can't fall into that trap. But I do agree completely. And I think, look, volunteering a lot of the time is, I'd say, traditionally sort of top down, but that's because it has to be, or the safeguarding, the training and all these other things and the kind of day-to-day management of volunteers. But yes, there's a world in which there could be more sort of bottom-up community-led activities, but again, how do you facilitate that? And that's kind of what we hope we're moving towards. All of the systems I used as a volunteer before were largely email-led. Well, there's no world of a community that lives with what 200 people on an email chain, it would be insane. So, this does open up a world of possibilities, and I think that's kind of what we like to explore. And, just touching upon how we've worked with RVS, and someone asked like how far we are in terms of the rollout. And to be quite frank, when we were talking with Sam and Dave at the outset, we said, this is what we can do now. This is what we can't do. We were very open and upfront about that, but here's what we'd be happy to do over X period of time. But we're basically never stopping. And that's the point, is like we just listen to the feedback of organizations, and that's what brings out some of these amazing creative ideas that end up in the form of tech, hopefully, right? So I think exactly like that, Chris, we're going to have an organization that will come on and says, all of our volunteers are ambassadors. We don't say where they go, what they do. How can you help us support that? And we naturally want to then build functionality to support that. And suddenly that's functionality that everybody can make use of. And I think that's the kind of beauty of what we do.
But then I think there's another idea that I've had in the back of brain for the last couple of years, and we've tried to test it with the old VMS, but Volunteero was going to allow us to explore it further, is your idea there, Chris, where yes, we have our service structure, yes, we do this, but there's people that might not want to do that, but they like the idea of RVS, but they want to do something, but they're not sure what, is how can we allow them to come on board, be one of our sort of cohort or army, whatever, but then we could say to them, for example, if there's no one in your community, like you said, doing let's just say litter pick, just pick that litter pick. Do you want to let us know and we can broadcast out on your behalf and people accept it and you can manage that? Or insight gathering, so for example, local council, do you want to know where there are potholes in your area? We can put a broadcast out in that area, say any RVS volunteers, if there's a pothole, click this report and say yes. Or for example yourselves, if there's insight you want, we could then broadcast these missions and tasks, just blanket across our sort of cohort, and they can pick it up on the app. So share learning and really understand what is it that these local communities want or need, or can help that insight gathering, even to statutory services, utility providers. If does United Utilities want to know where there's water leaks, right, let's go out to our network and see if they can say yes, there's one within a mile of my house. All those sorts of really interesting micro one-off but true insight gathering and community activation that we can really enable alongside whatever it is they do as part of their day-to-day volunteer. And it's going to be quite an interesting one, but yeah, there are checks and balances, as I said, to go in there.
One other snippet and anecdote that I wanted to just throw in there about when you can create a community of your volunteers, what happens. And a lot of that's unknown, but what we're already seeing is really cool. I'll give you one anecdote, right? You've got a load of befrienders out there. Before Volunteero, they were isolated. They didn't know everybody else existed. They didn't know they were part of this team of 100 befrienders out there in the community supporting people. But now they do. And so I'll give you an example what I struggled with as a befriender. I thought going into befriending, and if anyone knows befriending, they'll know how ignorant I was here. I thought I was like, okay, great, it's just going to be a really sweet older person who's going to give me a whole load of wisdom, and I'm really going to be the beneficiary of this whole situation. That wasn't the case. They'd been isolated for ages. They were often grumpy, and I totally understand why they would be. But I didn't know what to do in terms of helping them open up and get to a point of building a relationship. So I wish I could have gone to a chat group with my fellow volunteers and said, my client's a little bit shy, has anyone got any tips and stuff like that? And now we've seen and heard from organizations where volunteers are like asking each other for ideas. Someone comes back and says, what's their favorite, band on YouTube with them, play this game, talk about this, that and the other. And it's so cool to see a bit of peer-to-peer support that couldn't be facilitated beforehand. But you had a question.
It's quite a simple, basic question, but it would just be really helpful to understand the difference of Volunteero in terms of your long-term mission and GoVo. Because I think initially when GoVo was set up, it was very much about that frictionless onboarding and journey, wasn't it? So I guess I'm just trying to understand where your USPs are. Because you're obviously working really well together, there's a kind of collaboration, but almost what is unique to deliver it. Is it more back-end or
Yeah, so GoVo is not a VMS, so the idea is GoVo provides that marketplace. So essentially, go land on GoVo and hopefully you'll see hundreds of opportunities, different causes, different themes. Obviously the idea of the ID check once, and hopefully that evolves to become, we can build more in, so we're reducing admin and frictionless further down the chain. But it is just that initial matching, so that's where GoVo starts and ends. They go on, they find the opportunity, they click on, and then within RVS, they would then land on Volunteero, and their onward journey would be there. So hopefully we should see that their experience matches, so it's seamless, it's frictionless on Govo. They can explore opportunities, and then if they want to on Volunteero, they can do exactly the same as well. So Govo is just that initial first step. Volunteero does actual volunteer management, activity, service delivery, all that sort of stuff.
And I think we work really well together in the sense that actually we've got largely the same mission at the end of the day, right? Increase impact, increase contributions from volunteering, and make it simple. Like, we have a marketplace as well. Govo has a marketplace, but it's not a zero-sum game, right? We have a different type of audience potentially to what Govo does, and if we can get, our clients just want volunteers. How they get them really largely doesn't matter, to be honest with you. So that's why we do it. And the other thing I would say is, unfortunately, in the non-profit tech sector, everyone else is a little bit cagey, and we don't want to be cagey. We believe if you've gone onto any other tech systems, everything connects with everything like that out of the box. That should exist in our world as well. We should be what's called API first, where we go, it doesn't matter whether you want to post your volunteering opportunity to Reach or Govo or whatever it is, we should be able to just be the facilitator of that. And whether we're the VMS to do that or another one, that's the world that should exist. And that can create that ecosystem of sort of seamlessness as well. But hopefully this partnership can sort of propel and push that idea forward, and we can bring others along in the way.
Yes. It's a slightly tongue-in-cheek question. I'm just curious as to why you put if we execute as opposed to when we execute. So my curiosity is, with that in mind, unless that's a complete sort of not intentional use of the word if, what would be the things that could stumble that? And just very quickly, if anybody's interested, if we were all using like youth nightclub names, mine would be called Ritzy Volunteers, which I think is quite sassy. But yeah, I'm curious as to what you perceive, presuming the hypothesis of those blocks or risks.
It's a great question. It is a great question. I think the if is there for some pretend fake humility, maybe, I don't know. It is when, and we're definitely on the right track and on the way there.
Can I just say, I didn't like that. I ignored it when I saw it, and I thought I'll pick that up later, so well done. Because that's not possible.
Well, you were my manager 10 years ago, so clearly taking
Isn't that what we all want to achieve, though? I think whatever you're going for, that's what you want, is more impact with better volunteer experience. I think whichever all our missions are, I'm hoping those of us in the room are, actually we want improved volunteer experience and more impact.
I think, to add to Ash, I think the if, although again, it's when, but if, because
can we just drop the if?
when it happens, when it happens, the only way it will happen is everyone in the room behind the same idea. So I think that's where it comes from, is we definitely want it to happen. It is a case of when for me, but that journey will be as long as the adoption takes. And that is the challenge, is what does that adoption look like, and how can we work collectively to make that as effective as and impactful as possible. So we'll go, sorry Ash.
I think in terms of the risk that we see, we've already seen some, right? It's not been, just sunshine and rainbows the whole way through, right? As a famous quote, I think from our man Winston Churchill, no, even the best laid plans never survive, contact with the enemy, essentially. Now, not to say volunteers are enemy by any means, but what it is to say that when you put something out into the world, you're only going with what you're theorizing at that stage. It's then what you see in action on the ground, and then you have to be receptive and responsive to what's actually happening, what the feedback is, and then you have to iterate and tweak. So we've kind of seen that already. Things like, who's going to be the point person has been a great question that we've been discussing a lot. What happens when a DBS renewal comes up? We hadn't really given that too much thought, and this whole new world opens up a world of different questions, but each one that comes up, we just have to kind of tackle head on and come up with the best solution and iterate.
Yeah, definitely. Joe?
I've got many questions. Those who know me well will not be surprised by this, and a couple of interconnected. So I wonder if there's something in terms of long-term vision. This would be amazing for the sector. I know we've talked about passports for about 3 million years, but could we almost think about not necessarily the entire passport, but breaking it up? So references feels like a really easy one, because they're not really worth the paper they're written on in many cases. So could we have something where we could agree and use the platform like GoVo to say, actually, these are the core questions we ask on references, that's it, end of, that is the risk, that's okay. Our charities, we kind of have to go through a process to agree it. Could we then be thinking about, okay, safeguarding, the training is pretty much the same regardless of where you are. So actually the bit that you get from your organisation is this is who you contact, this is the process here, but this is what safeguarding means. Could we see a world where we could actually do that through one platform so it is more fluid? Because I think until we get that, the fluidity feels challenging. And then my other question, which you know I'll always ask, is around accessibility. I work for RNIB, for those who don't know, and we find it really challenging with every single system we bring in for every single part of the organisation in terms of that accessibility and people not understanding. So they think you can plug like additional things onto websites and it actually breaks screen readers. So what can we do to make sure that's inbuilt, and thinking about different accessibility points from the perspective of different disabilities? And so when we're thinking about the training offer, what does that look like as well? And how can we, as a sector, walk the talk in terms of accessibility and inclusion? Because I think it would be really interesting to build all of those things together and make a real difference. And then anybody can volunteer and anybody can access it, and you don't have to do the same thing over and over and over again.
They're really good points, and thanks for the support you've given GoVo. I know we've done a lot of work with you and your teams on it. More to do. There's always more to do, but that is something. It's a core foundation in what we want GoVo to do. But in terms of, I'm not a big fan of the term volunteer passport, but it's one that's generally accepted as usage. That idea is correct. If we did a straw poll, I'd be fascinated to know how much money we collectively in this room spend on safeguarding, data protection, manual handling, all those sorts of things. Right, as you said, 99% of it exactly the same. All you need to know is what to do if there's an issue and what's your responsibility within that ecosystem, whatever it is. So surely that amount of money we could save by having a central place that does it. And if we want to explore that and go over, that's our aspiration as well. But think of the cost savings, the additional resource, the extra capacity you could place elsewhere within your structures. It's not about replacing that resource, so because we've made X savings on training, that goes on your bottom line. No, that should be put into my mantra, the people first engagement, so they can actually get to know the volunteers more rather than just chasing them to do training, all of that stuff. I was just thinking about an example that we had when we did VR, that the prize that we're chasing is massive. So I'm just thinking about one example. When we were doing volunteer responders, like David said, we'd already tested with a couple of other bigger charities the passporting, and it had worked. We got it actually working with St John, and it was so lucky that we had because when they had to then produce vaccinators, we could then recruit 20,000 vaccinators for them. We ID checked them, we did the first set of checks, and then we just handed them across, and then all they got to do was teach them how to actually jab. And so the prize is massive, isn't it, if we can get this doing. I think there's another thing, and I'd like to know what people in the room think. It's testing the comfort levels. So I'm a bit more gung-ho on these things, and Dave will go, I don't know if we can do that. But I wanted on GoVo. This is where it's going. It's like the team meeting. He's like, what's she going to say? What's she going to say? But it's around the GoVo. I wanted, to your point, to put some caveats in there that said, basically, if you sign up, you're agreeing to this. And if you don't want to agree to it, you don't have to sign up. It's not an absolute. To see if we could just take like-minded people with us, and then the others might join us later, they might not. But that, it's the comfort of, we have to be okay that not everyone's going to join the party. And I think in the sector we are so over-accommodating that it becomes kind of decision by committee, and then nothing ever happens on these kind of issues. So I was just wondering what the comfort levels are in the room, because I'm a bit more like, do you want to sign up and come with us? And if you don't, okay, we might see you later, and just do it anyway. Otherwise, we just won't. And I think that's why these kind of conversations have been going on for years, haven't they? Yeah, I think just about and again, I'm obviously very digital tech first as a charity we are, is, a culture we've always had is that's great, but we need, in certain circumstances, we need to allow non-digital processes. So that's another caveat I'd say, is we're not entirely that. We have I can hear my assistant director EDI in my ear going, so we need to make sure there's non-digital, all those sorts of things. So that's something else we need to make sure is wrapped around. I know there were a few hands raised.
I was just going to go on that one, because I think, like with lots of things we do in volunteering, we need to think about like our adoption model, right? And like actually, if we design this just for people that like working in the way we're working now and to please them, like that's basically pointless, like because they're already on the bus sort of thing. I think, you know, we need to think about how we appeal to, you know, probably smaller, more niche groups to build that kind of early majority, so that and work with that group of people to bring the other people along. I think that's how that's how I think I do, which is that, you know, that adoption curve. Like work with people who are really into this, who are happy to try it, who are happy to learn and innovate. And you know, there's a whole set of organisations in this room, and we'll all have different, you know, organisational contexts and organisational appetites for innovation or not. And some of us will be sitting here going, whoa, like that, you know, I'm never going to get anyone to like that. And others will be like, yeah, I really want to do that. But the people who will probably bring the more cautious ones along will be the people who've got to actually look at this organisation, who tried it and got there.
Yeah, and you know, it's said it's going to take time, isn't it? We're building it. So when we first launched Govo, we did registered charities only as the first tranche, because we could easily check them. You know, there was data sets to check they were, they say they were, and all that kind of stuff. Whereas going with KICs, community groups, grassroots was going to take more time and resource and be a little bit more difficult. But so we did that first, but now we have brought them along as well. So in that mix, we've got really tiny, there's only 5 people that are doing that work, up to nationals and kind of everything in between, which was really important for us to do that. But I guess I was just talking in the last point about sharing, you know, everyone signs up to the same safeguarding basic standard, or everyone's happy that we share DBSs or whatever it is. But, you know, again, it's just a process, isn't it? It's going to take some time.
And there's been hand raised at the back for a while, is that?
Sorry, I'm Matt, I work for Safety Children. A lot of stuff about compliance of the complete pointlessness of references, and most of my life is spent mitigating the excesses of my colleagues who really care about health, safety, security, whatever. And I guess my question in terms of fluid volunteering is, have you been able to not just outsource those responsibilities to the individual volunteer, but like upwards, internally? Have you kind of gone, oh yeah, actually this thing that we do over here is actually pointless, and we've learned that because there's some people who volunteer for us in role A, and then they're working with team B, and in team B they need this and that they don't, but actually in reality it doesn't really make any difference, we just do it because we do it. It's a very wordy question. What I'm asking is, have you been able to learn about like stuff you do that can be improved across the organisation?
Yeah, so I think obviously, and everyone here is going to go on for that journey. I think at RVS we are quite a big risk appetite. I think that's shown with, you know, volunteer responders, where we literally, hundreds of thousands of volunteers, we've never saw them. We just, obviously they did an ID check, things like that, and then we sent them the Get a New Started guides, and they were making phone calls, they were doing shopping, they were doing X, Y and Z, and that was a huge, I don't want to say leap of faith, because as long as there are checks and balances in place, we're like, you know, this is going to work. And yes, it was a time and place within the pandemic where everyone was just leaning in, but actually we've now started taking that learning, and across our services we now mirror a lot of that. We have Getting You Started guides in some of our course, so actually, and that contains the core safeguarding, you know, what's if an issue, where to go to, so they don't have to go to e-learning, it's actually there, and then they just tick a box, they sign it to say they've read it, so we've got that assurances. And yes, that's one huge leap of faith, that some areas of the charity were like, oh, we don't know, but again, we need to play that back and say, well, actually, it's been going 6-12 months. A, there's been no more issues than normal compared to what we saw historically, and actually B, your conversion rate is much better because the volunteers aren't jumping through hoops before they get to that end delivery. We're making it easier for them to do it. And then similarly, we regularly review our compliance. So as I said at the start, you know, 65 roles, they each have their own training requirements. We are regularly condensing, reviewing, adapting, testing and learning some different things. So I'm sure all of us, I mean, it might be worth doing a session at some point talking about how are we all working more efficiently across our sort of structures, because I know there's going to be various nuances there.
I was just going to say, I mean, we're continuously learning. So the Govo platform is on 2-week sprints. So every 2 weeks they're releasing something else. And we've got colleagues from across the sector that are in groups that are constantly feeding in and going, have you thought about that? Or we would really like to see this. And then we work out how many people need that. Is that, you know, to your point, is it just quite nuanced or is it a need across the piece? So if anyone isn't involved in them and they'd like to, then let Dave know and we can make sure that you're keyed in. I think on the volunteer management system and putting Volunteero in, it's been we can't get away from, we have to do the business case, right, don't we, for all these things to get it through management and trustee boards. And for us, it was like efficiencies as well. It's given us a huge opportunity to clean up the lines. So every time we tackle the next kind of type of service, we're going, okay, is this, to your point, just because we always do it like this? Or is it the way we should do it? Because we have to, as charities, all of us, don't we? We have to get as much bang for buck out of any investment that we put in. So, you know, the same with this system. We're cleaning up the lines. We're making things simpler. We're trying to get those efficiencies as we're working through. So our service redesign work is going sort of in parallel to putting the VMS in.
It's funny, actually, just really quickly, as being the tech provider on the other side, people implementing tech, it often ends up as being the catalyst point for assessing some of these things. When, I mean, you know, that's great because obviously we're here to kind of somewhat challenge and say, oh, right, you want to do that? Why? Sort of thing. And it raises the question, like, you know, is there a valid reason that this still exists or is it a legacy situation? But I think there's an argument to say, unfortunately, look, everyone in this room deals with lots of auditing and stuff that happens every year, but maybe that's not something that we're all auditing as regularly as we should be. Like, let's just sit down, reassess our onboarding journey. Do we need all this still? Do we need all of these questions on the form? Do we need all of these things? So maybe there is an argument to say that's just something that you put in as a team and you kind of huddle on a periodic basis to kind of just sense check what you're already doing.
And it's so important because we've just done the annual report sign-offs, and this was pre the VMS changes, but I'm hoping to see another kick up. But last year, because we'd already started the thinking and we were starting to strip some things out and release more people time to support, like Dave says, more engagement with volunteers, more engagement with our partners, working with other charities, etc. Our reach numbers, you know, of people that our frontline services helped, volunteer hours, etc. It was probably the biggest numbers that we've seen probably in the last 10 or 15 years. So last year was massive for RVS in terms of reach, but that was because we were clawing time back by using all the systems to the best of their ability. So hopefully, no pressure, Ash, but I'm wanting to see that at the end of this year as well.
There were a couple other questions. Maybe we've got time for just a couple more.
I just wanted to come back to Sam's point about just doing it with the passport or whatever we're calling it, because I've been in the sector 30 years and it's always been something we talked about. And I think we do need a bit of, I think collectively most organisations are on board. We just need somebody really bold to say, okay, this is what safeguarding looks like. If you think you can sign up to 80% of this, this is what we're going to agree. This is what GDPR is, information security, etc. So I'd love to see an approach like that, you know. I'm going to say something a little bit controversial. It's kind of the thing I expect from somebody like NCBO to say, this is the infrastructure. Sorry, apologies if anybody's here from NCBO. But that's the kind of thing that I kind of expect to come from that infrastructure body of, this is the bold step we need to take. And you know, Joe, I think that's what we need, is that something to say, this is what it is. And you either come with us or you don't. And that's then it's a charity choice. But the more we try to collaborate on it, we all vehemently agree, quite aggressively sometimes, and yet we can't seem to move it from that room into this is what it looks like.
I'm happy to make the offer if anyone wants to sort of get together with Dave and I and start to sort of have a look at the art of the possible. We are really up for it.
There was I had a conversation, a weird person who I could speak to every head of volunteering over the last 12 months. Every single one in a large organisation said the same thing. We need to work through something like a micro-volunteering model. They either have technical limitations, cultural limitations, whatever it is. And you said, I'm coming in to say, am I crazy? Well, I can tell you from just my personal perspective, you're doing what people are talking about and you're taking the leap. So it's just a really cool thing that you kind of put in, you know, people both of you. So I just would say,
revolution.
It's what people want, right? But they just maybe don't know the how just yet, and you're kind of crafting on that.
So I'm happy to take away as an action that we can obviously facilitate, obviously a bit of call to action, anyone in this room remotely having a session, right, okay, what there's any standardised initial first step training, even if it is just, right, let's go back to basic references, really basic level, and just see, right, what does that look like, test the water, trial it on Govo, see what's there, and then sort of go from there. So yeah, more than happy to commit to that and take that away for us to facilitate.
That's exciting. I love
Add that on the
the
list.
grit and the oyster. It's how you get the momentum.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you.